Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Great. It feels like a family reunion in here. I know it's been a long time since we've all gotten back together as a large group in person. With the pandemic, most of our meetings for the Racial Justice and Equity Commission have been virtual, making it more challenging, I think, for many in terms of the types of discussions that took place. But it's wonderful to see everyone in person. I recall last August, July or August, I think it was July, when we had the actual first kickoff and all of you came for the launch, and we were actually in the other side of the Civic Center. Some people went there today, but it's just truly good to have you back. I want to welcome all the community stakeholders that are here today, all the elected officials, particularly those elected officials from the Peoria City Council, as well as the Peoria County Board that confirmed all of the appointments that were recommended by Chairman Andrew Rand and I. And I'd like to ask all those who are elected officials with the county board as well as the city council, if you're here, to please stand. Let's give them a hand. So it's been a year. It's been almost 1 year since you really started digging into your work, identifying the problems, the gaps, the issues, the opportunities associated with racial justice and equity. And you know the conversation of having this commission started right after the murder, the death of Mr. George Floyd, but it continued on with a community response right here in Peoria with one of the largest commissions in the state of Illinois to focus on addressing those disparities based upon race right here in our community. So I want to thank all of you that have been involved in this process. The work, I know, is hard. The work is equity work. The work has been persistent, and I thank you for sticking with it. Despite the virtual meetings, this is the first inaugural annual report out of the Joint Commission on Racial Justice and Equity. So I'm excited. I'm excited to hear the recommendations that come forth. I thank all the elected officials in advance for being open to those recommendations that come forth from this committee, from this commission, and all of the subcommittees, all the focus groups. I also want to thank Illinois Central College and its Racial Justice and Equity coordinator, Mrs. Charity Gunn, who put in hours of research in developing what you see before you, that the report, the Peoria City County Racial Disparities Report. It shows a lot of problems, right, that we have, a lot of problems. But again, these are opportunities for us to work on. So your work, I'm confident, will result in removing gaps, removing barriers, improving lives, and improving the climate for people within our community. Lastly, I want to thank, well, right before lastly, I want to thank Dr. Walter Milton. He was our trainer, online, virtual trainer for racial justice and equity, development and training, cultural competency training. He did some of that training at Illinois Central College before he actually did it for the RJE Commission, but he's done it all over the world. And he's brought with him his partner in crime, Dr. Joel Freeman, and I'm not going to give their introduction because Mary and Tim are, but I'm just excited that you're here today to join us for this important event. And lastly, I want to thank Mary Peterson and Tim Birchie for their leadership as co-chairs. Their dedicated leadership as co-chairs of the steering committee, more or less this commission. So thank you, Mary, thank you, Tim. And next up is my friend, Chairman Andrew Brand, County Board Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Mayor Ali. Do I have those titles in correct order? How many of you had the chance to see her at work yesterday? Show of hands. Was that not just a terrific presentation in a beautiful new venue? And as I said to her, thank goodness the air conditioning held out on what was a rough day, but my seat was nice and cool. And as I thought about some remarks today, my job is to say thank you, I think, to all the people in this room and those who aren't in this room today, as we hear the first annual report from the Commission on Racial Justice and Equity. The genesis of this year-long initiative began following the tragic murder and death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. And I think a brief history for some of you who are not familiar with our process may help understand how we have arrived today at this moment. In June of 2020, an ad hoc coalition on racial justice and equity was formed, bringing together government organizations, nonprofits, healthcare representatives, and community partnerships. Central to making real change in this space was the inclusion of community voices, and the Commission on Racial Justice and Equity was formalized in October of 2020 by the unanimous vote of the Peoria City Council and the Peoria County Board. So this commission represents a commitment to our community that we will work together for change, and also serves to acknowledge that your voices and effort are critical to making change happen. Following George Floyd's death, we saw waves of activism and a call to recognize and renew the fight to end racism. This commission carries that torch today in its stated vision, I quote, to end racism in the city and county government and to achieve racial equity and justice across our community, end quote. The Commission on Racial Justice and Equity was purposely set up to be community-centered, allowing for citizens to be the driving force for the change they wanted to see. Over 160 applications were received from people who wanted to participate and lean in to tackle systemic problems. With so many people working together, I look forward to hearing the progress they've made today. I'm here to say thank you to the steering committee members for their hard work and accomplishments. I'd also like to thank the members of the Commission's numerous subcommittees who shared in a true community-based effort. Finally, I'd like to thank Mary and Tim, who we will all hear from shortly. These co-chairs help navigate community data in their quest to benchmark and find data-driven solutions. The steering committees evaluated reporting dashboards and made appointments to subcommittees. Lest we forget, the committees had to also navigate the Open Meetings Act, something that private folks are not that accustomed to. I'd also like to thank my friend and colleague, Peoria County Board member, Randy Bryant, over here to my right, your left, who agreed to serve as the county's liaison to the commission. Tonight will be the first of many annual meetings to publicly report your work. While this is a joint commission of the city and the county, it is a public report to the greater community and a demonstration of what can be accomplished when we earnestly work together to tackle problems head on. Now, if I can introduce Tim Birchie and Mary Peterson. Thank you, Mary.
I don't know about all of you, but let's just take a deep breath. We worked really hard to get here tonight, and so many of you put in so many hours and time and commitment, and we want to thank you. Thank you, Mayor Ali. Thank you, Chairman Rand,
for appointing Tim and I as the co-chairs for this commission that's about change. The commission was launched in July of 2021. The Peoria City County Joint Commission on Racial Justice and Equity is a community-led collaborative effort comprised of 1 steering committee and 8 subcommittees and about 150 individuals. As Chairman Rand talked about the reason for the creation of this commission. The commission is working to create a multifaceted, coordinated strategic plan to reduce the racial equities across the community, Peoria City and Peoria County. Using data, input from, and feedback from residents, and best practices from other communities, this strategic plan and subsequent follow-up report will advise the Peoria City Council and Peoria County Board in their efforts to end racism in the local government and achieve racial equity and justice throughout the community. As the strategies and recommendations are implemented, the Commission will measure the progress toward the goals, communicate the progress, annual meetings, to communicate the progress to the community, and to adjust the strategic plan as necessary. In collaboration with residents, the Commission will lead the charge to promote inclusive community discussions, develop information and educational activities to increase the community's understanding of racial justice and equity, as well as the local efforts underway to achieve this. Tim?
My friends, in our first year, there's no doubt that we encountered some headwinds. We faced an organization that was starting from scratch. Our members had, for the most part, little experience working together. Many of them hardly knew each other. And no established practices or policies existed to get that done. We had no work plan set to get our work done. We had to invent that. And we were dealing with a problem that was more intractable than any other problem facing our nation. And of course, that is how to address centuries of racism that helped to form. Helped is the wrong word, excuse me. I should say that was created as a part of the original sin of this country. And finally, we were starting in the midst of the most severe pandemic in our nation's history, which created material obstacles to us getting together to do this work. But there were tailwinds, too, that helped us. Certainly there was a national discussion on racism that was taking place, which was occurring after the horrific and highly profiled killings of Black Americans. There is the experience of other cities and counties who had begun to work on this that we could draw upon. There is the establishment of national organizations that were creating resources for communities like ours to look to. And most of all, most important to us, is that we had a city and a county government and a community of people here in this area who were willing to embrace and commit to true change. Soon after our inaugural meeting here at the Civic Center, our steering committee undertook its organizational activities, which included interviewing communities that had worked on problems like this before. One of the most noteworthy, of course, is King County, Seattle, Washington, but there are other communities that are doing this work too. We were uniformly told two things. First, be patient. Organizing this work takes time, and there will be fits and starts. There will be good things, there will be bad things, there will be high points, there will be low points. But keep after it. It may take years. Second, be data-driven. Anecdotal evidence is important and helps drive plan development. But in the end, solid data for what you're doing, what you want to do, and whether you're making progress towards that goal is critical and essential to accomplishing your ends. The steering committee then established a 4-stage work plan, which was a data-driven process. Step 1, identification of key data indicators showing racial disparity in our community. Second, development of strategic plans in our subcommittee areas, our 8 subcommittee areas, utilizing community input. Stage 3, development of an implementation process for those strategic plans. And fourth, Stage 4, monitoring parties responsible for implementation and measuring the change in the indicators, the key indicators that we identified. So, where have we gotten this first year and what are our next steps? We'll address that shortly. But first, we're fortunate this evening to hear from two speakers who are nationally known in this area. So, Mary?
DH 365. Dr. Joel Freeman is a co-founder and co-author of K-12 Black History Curriculum, Black History 365. It's an educational entity that engages all ages, where purpose is to create cutting-edge resources that invite students, educators, and others to become critical thinkers, compassionate listeners, fact-based, respectful communicators, and action-oriented solutionists. Talked about that earlier today. I wrote that down. I didn't realize I had it in my notes. Dr. Joel Freeman, one of the co-founders, I went to look him up, and he said he has a resume/obituary type stuff. He was a mentor chaplain for the NBA Washington Bullets and the Wizards for 20 seasons. Again, I mentioned that he is the co-founder and co-author of Black History 365, and the book is about that too. He's the CEO and president of Freeman Institute, dealing with people who drive you crazy. I told him earlier today that he had one that stood out to me. Some of his most popular seminars are diversity, the value of mutual respect, a white man's journey into Black history. I was thinking, white man can't jump, but it didn't go there. When strangling someone isn't an option. We need to talk about that. I've had some of those days. And this is one I really love. If no one loves you, create the demand. Create the demand if no one loves you. Tim, if you want it. Dr. Milton.
Our other speaker is Dr. Walter Milton. Now, Dr. Milton is the co-founder and author of Black History 365, an inclusive account of American history, and he's the chief executive officer from the Hart International Educational Services. For 12 years, think about this now for those of you involved with education, for 12 years he served as a school superintendent and survived. Through his vision, he has had the ability to motivate educational organizations and communities and developed and supported initiatives and programs that encourage students to achieve at their highest potential. Dr. Milton's leadership has led and guided schools in his former district to receive the honorable and distinctive blue ribbon status. He realizes that American public schools are now faced with achievement issues unparalleled in history. Access to quality education is not a guarantee for all children, but it is the driving force for Dr. Milton. There are a lot of publications that he has produced. I'll mention three. He's the author of a book titled Matter of Life or Death: Why Black Men Must Save Black Boys in America's Public Schools. Second, Me in the Making: One Man's Journey to Become a School Superintendent. And then third, Parents' Perception of Schools and Schools' Perception of Parents. So, Drs. Milton and Freeman.
Good evening. It's always tough to face an audience after they have eaten. So if you are daydreaming, just indulge us. Act like you're listening, okay? We came a long way, Baltimore and Texas. But I'm truly honored to stand before you today to talk about this incredible topic. But before I do that, I would be remiss in my obligation at the podium tonight if I did not acknowledge Dr. Rita Ali. Can we all give her a big hand? You're truly a merchant of hope. You really are. Dr. Sharon Karad, if she's, there you are, Superintendent of Peoria Public Schools. There she is, and Miss Martha Ross. And Martha Ross is instrumental in us being here this evening because she had the leadership, the direction to bring forth a curricula that was going to be alive and well, and that was going to impact students, all students in general, African American students or black students in particular. So I thank you for having the courage and the vision to move forward. So as you can see that we are in a room filled with merchants of hope. When I first arrived here last night and we visited the school district, we had an opportunity to visit the mayor's office, and I was just really pleased. And I want to say that this is your epoch. This is the dawn of your new beginning. I believe that Peoria has the capacity to become a national model. I can definitely envision you guys taking the synergy, the creativity, and also the symbiotic relationship that you're developing here and spreading that across the world. You know, we say that our textbook here, and it's really thick, it's heavy, okay, but I want to work out, you know, I just put this in. But this is our love letter to the world. And I think what you guys are doing is developing a testament that the world can implement, replicate, and develop and move forward, because it's the goal of all of us to make this world a better place to be. Am I correct? Yeah. So let me just tell you how this journey started. Black History 365. It was a vision. And I remember an experience that I had, that little picture of me, it's symbolic because that's where it all started. I was a fourth grader, and I remember going to school, and my teacher, Miss Laudisi, said that I'm going to teach you Black history tomorrow. So I remember going home telling my mother and father that we were going to learn Black history. And really, I didn't know that there was a distinguished Black history, but one thing my parents would always say, they would inculcate in my siblings and myself that our history goes back to the beginning of time. And that stayed with me. So I said to my mother and father, I said, hey, I want to wear that blue suit that you saw me in. My favorite blue suit. Now looking back in retrospect, that was the only suit I had. But nevertheless, my mother dressed me. She gave me the snap-on tie, and I felt somewhat presidential as I entered into the classroom. And this day was special to me, you know, because I wanted to raise my hand and let the teacher know, Miss Laudisi, know that I knew a lot about Black history. I was excited because I can talk about kingdoms, and I can talk about kings, and I can talk about Mansa Musa and all of those things that my parents taught me. But one thing that pierced my heart, the film sure came on, and the first thing that I saw was a so-called slave master beating a so-called enslaved unmercifully. And what did it do? It ushered so much shame and humiliation because it contradicted everything that I was taught at home. She said that this is where our history began, but it was antithetical to what my parents were saying. So I remember going home, and I've always been a one-man union in my household. I'm at the bottom of 8 kids. So I always, you know, fought for my rights, you know. But this one day, I started crying. I'll never forget this. And I felt beaten down. And every time I fell from my throne as a king, my father would always pick me up. But his heart ached that day. And I remember looking in his eyes. And I don't think that he had the ability, because he knew that there was a difference, a distinguishing aspect of schooling versus education. And oftentimes we receive too much schooling and too little education. And so the contradictory claims was that in my household, I was being educated. But when I go to the four corners or the four walls called a school, I was being schooled. And so my mother said to me, she said, one day you're going to be able to tell the story. You're going to be able to tell the script. You're going to be able to touch millions and millions and millions of young people across this world. Now, you know, my mother would always have me thinking that I could fly until I jumped off that second-story building. But at any rate, I believed her. So I was a superintendent, and my mother called me one day and she said, you know, you are not going to be a superintendent too much longer. And I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about? We're building new schools. I just got a big pay increase. I'm doing okay. She said, everything is going to seem like it's collapsing in your world because God is calling you to do something different. I didn't want to hear those words because every time my mother predicted my life, it happened. My mother said, I may be dead and gone, but you're going to listen. I lost my father, who was my best friend, my older brother, who was my second best friend. That week, my mother died unexpectedly. So what did it do? Man, I was in pain. I was a mama's boy, still am in some sense. But I knew that I had to think differently. So I went to my school board out of the blue. I met with them privately and I wanted to tender my resignation. I started my company. I thought that was it. You know, we did well. We did a lot of work, made a lot of money, but that wasn't it. I remember waking up in tears one night and thinking about my 4th grade experience. And I heard my mother's voice that you're going to be able to tell the story, the whole story. Not half of the story, not the middle part of the story, the whole story. And so I started working. I started writing. I didn't even know what I was doing. And I said, you know, tell my family, I said, I think I'm going to get deep into this. I got a phone call to make. I called this guy right here, Joe Freeman. I said, hey man, what are you doing? He says, oh, nothing. You know, that's Joel. I mean, Joel is always busy, but he's always doing nothing because he can always be busier. That's him. He doesn't stop. But one thing, I said, Joe, can you come to Nashville and meet with me because I'm working on something and I need you to be a part of this. And it was almost like he already knew what I was thinking. When he got there, he brought all his magnificent images and we just talked. We spent the whole day just planning. And I was excited because I knew that he was crazy just like me. And so we went all over the United States convincing people that we had a book. In our mind, this was our book. We saw this. But were people, what they saw was Word documents. They saw a dummy copy of a book, 32 pages. And after those 32 pages, as Joel says, it turns into a blizzard. It's all white. And I remember we were meeting with the Secretary of Education, and they said, well, let me see the book. And so right before they got to page 32, because there was no 33, I gave Joel the look, and whenever we get that look, we have to snatch the book back. So he snatched the book. Secretary of Education, man. So he probably can't jump, but he has some hops, I'll tell you. He got the book. But at any rate, so what happened, we had this vision. You know, we talked about earlier when we were meeting with Dr. Karat's principals, we talked about how it was in our household. And Joel and I both were getting ready to get introduced to alternative housing, called getting kicked out of the house, because we were so deep into the work, because this was a calling on our lives. And you don't really understand the significance of true calling unless you've gone through what we've gone through. It was almost 3 years of 12 to 16-hour days relentlessly. No break, no vacation, no time off. Because we knew that we were working on something that was much bigger than ourselves. And we knew that we were just a vessel to do it. And we had to be responsive to that call. And so what do we have now as a result of this work? We have 1,000. We start in ancient Africa. We go all the way from the beginning of time. We did the etymology of the word, Akubellum, which means the Garden of Eden. And we come all the way past George Floyd. We have images that are unbelievable, that people have never seen before. Our oldest image dates back to 1553. See, Dr. Freeman was working on this. I was working on this. He is from Canada. I'm from New York. And those pictures, we were being developed, we were being made there. We never, ever knew that we were going to come together to do this work. Jay-Z's producer did all of our music. We have 40 songs. Each song tells a story. Each song tells a depiction of what life was for many people. Then we have so many things in the book. We have QR codes that we have a strong integration of technology, but we didn't stop there. We said, okay, you know, we have to hit them young. So now we have kindergarten through 8th grade, and we're going back and we're going to do pre-K or pre-K to first grade, rather, so that we can start early. And one thing that I found out before I passed the mic over to Joel is that when we start young and we tell the truth early on, we create an opportunity for this world to be the vision that we desire to be, a great place. We really do. Before I pass the mic, I just want to share something with you. This is one of my favorite statements. It's called, be careful. Be careful of your thoughts, because your thoughts become your words. Be careful of your words, for your words reflect your feelings. Be careful of your feelings, because your feelings reflect your actions. Be careful of your actions, because your actions become your habits. Be careful of your habits, because your habits dictate your character. Be careful of your character, because your character becomes your destiny. Embrace your destiny, because ultimately it will become your legacy. Dr. Freeman.
Yeah, before I share a little bit, I have to say that I just took a quick look at this and the amount of time I had just before coming up, and all I can say is just the tremendous amount of work that this means. It's kind of like the difference for those who are builders between building a 2-story house or an 80-story skyscraper. A 2-story house, you just put some concrete down, let it cure for 28 days and start building. 80-story skyscraper takes probably 2 to 2.5 years to go through zoning, dig down to bedrock, use the right PSI cement, the right type of rebar, and 2 years, 2.5 years later, there's no above ground results yet. But the foundation dictates the elevation. You have put together a foundation for an 80-story skyscraper here. And it's not sexy. The work you've done, the hard data, the anecdotal data, hearing people's words, their emotions, and then putting it all in this format, you're now ready to start with the above ground results. And it's a joy to be in your presence, because we can only imagine the amount of work that you've gone through. Thank you. My story, I grew up in Alberta, Canada, where I come from. I spent about probably 2 hours a day, every day, from late October to early April on the ice, playing ice hockey. And I ended up leaving home at the age of 17. If you can go back to that picture there, I don't know if it's possible, but a picture of Walter and myself. You can see a long-haired hippie. I was a dope-smoking fool. And by the time that picture was taken, I'd already traveled about 5,000 to 6,000 miles around North America. And my whole life turned around. 8 years or 7 years after this picture was taken, I became one of the first chaplains in the history of the NBA. And it was an experience all by itself. But it's germane to the story because that's where my first interest in black history emerged. Because you have on the 78-79 team, you had Kevin Porter, Bobby Dandridge, Elvin Hayes, you had Wes Unseld, and all those players. And they're looking at me like, I'm supposed to spill my guts to that guy? Are you kidding me? So I looked 15, maybe 16 tops. And no mentor, and just this young kid just coming in and trying to just love on these guys as best as I could, and to be a confidential resource to them, because their position in life attracts a lot of insincere people. And ended up, probably the biggest miracle over 20 seasons was I survived 6 coaching changes. And that it's huge, because coaches, they just clear the deck. And 3 GM changes during that period. And really bonded with the players of all different ethnicities. What happened is during that time, right around 1980, I realized that I was being asked questions I didn't have a clue about. And so it forced me to start studying. And I ended up meeting, actually I got Ivan Van Sertima's telephone number. His homes is pre-digital, so I called him up and I said, you don't know me and I barely know you, but I'd like for you to get to know me and I'd like to get to know you better. And we ended up, after 45 minutes, he asked me for my address. And 3 weeks later, I did this big box of his books, Egypt Revisited, Before Columbus They Came, his book on the Moors, his book about the Asiatic, the black presence in Asia, and different other books. And I just began to devour them. The first book was Egypt Revisited. It was like going down the turnpike at 90 miles per hour and wrapping my brain around a telephone pole. It was just a life-changing experience. And that's really where my interest in black history emerged, is trying to find some way to connect with the players, mostly of African descent. And I realized that, you can talk about sports, maybe religion, maybe the weather, but what happens is that whenever race relations, when you start talking about some difficult topics, the go-to for many of us who are Caucasian is to say, oh, my relatives came from Russia, or they came from Ireland, or they came from this. They had nothing to do with the slave trade or anything like that. So, end of conversation. And I realized that it was like Augustine said back in the 4th century. He said, at least it's attributed to him, he said, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. And so I practiced that. And so I would ask questions, and then I would ask more questions, and then ask more questions. There's a parable with 2 ears and 1 mouth. I was asking so many questions, and open-ended questions. And what began to emerge is the players began to accept me for who I was. And they saw that I had a curiosity-driven life. They saw that I was interested in them as individuals. And so what emerged is my interest in black history. I began to see the need for developing a collection. Now developed over 3,000 pieces. As Dr. Milton said, the oldest piece is dated to 1553, 1553. And so what happened when Walter called me, because we've been keeping in touch, and I met him, we met each other about a little over 2 decades ago when came to do some training for his cabinet. And he took me to his home, and that was unbelievable for a consultant. It's usually see you tomorrow morning 8:30. There's 2 or 3 good restaurants around, and see you tomorrow. But he invited me to meet his wife and his children, and that there was something about that cemented our hearts together in a deep way. And so we kept in touch. And when he called, later I told him, you had me at hello. Want to do this, go on this adventure together. We both suspended our businesses, put them on the shelves, and as he mentioned, 2.5 years. What emerged is a book that weighs 5.5 pounds. As he mentioned, 1,200 QR codes, over 2,500 images, just the content starting in ancient Africa, because you have a situation where most people, most books we saw started with the slave trade or enslavement, and it's like, that's no way to start a book about black history. What are you talking about? So we wanted to talk about the agriculture, the industry, the hunting, the fishing, the gathering of ancient Africa, the ancient African kingdoms that transcend the current geopolitical lines. And now we're ready to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of the last 4 centuries, because now we have context, historical, ancient context for everything. And even we just talked about enslavement and the slave trade. We talked about slave rebellions. I remember the night that we talked about it, and Walter was very adamant, we need to talk about the slave rebellions and how important that is. And we were able to tease that out, to show the history around that and what was really going on behind the scenes. And so basically what our desire throughout this whole project is, as was mentioned early on, is to invite people to uncomfortability. That's very important because this whole topic is uncomfortable for all of us. And then secondly, to invite us to become critical thinkers, to use the Socratic method when discussing things, but to then become compassionate listeners. My goodness, we've lost the art of listening, and to really listen and then listen some more. And then to become fact-based, respectful communicators, based on fact. Okay, it's on the internet, but is it based on fact? And to really do the research so that we can learn from each other. And then finally, to become action-oriented solutionists. To be men and women, to be individuals that will begin to look at the problems. Yes, let's look at it square in the eyes. And let's admit it, let's talk about it, let's deal with it. No matter how uncomfortable it seems. But then to be able to say, what are the solutions? And I really think that K through 12 probably has the best solutions gurgling around their heads and ricocheting around their brains. And to be able to come up with ideas, entrepreneurial ideas, and other types of things that can change the narrative, can shift paradigms. And we notice even during the struggle for civil rights, it was young children that left school at 11 o'clock in the morning. Teachers turned their back and said, do whatever you're going to do, jump out of windows, and then had the children's march. And that's what evoked the change around civil rights, when people on their TV sets saw young kids getting water cannon and dogs coming after them. That's what changed the hearts of so many people. And so children, again, can lead the way. Young people, students, young ladies, young men, different individuals can begin to take charge and take charge of their destiny and see what opportunities can emerge, blowing the dust off history and reanimating it into the lives of our contemporaries. And it's just a real privilege to be here in your presence. And, Dr. Milton, he's the trailblazer. I said this morning, we all have seen ads on TV where we say, man, I thought of that 15 years ago, well, you did nothing about it, did you? Someone else did it. And they got the TV ad and they're making all the money. But the thing is that he had the idea. Ideas are a dime a dozen, but he had the idea, he acted upon it, and then we collaborated and came together and now have a team of about 70 people. But it's just an incredible story, and we're only in about, there's 15,000 school districts around the country, and maybe 1%. And so we're just getting started. This 80-story skyscraper is just beginning to peak above the ground a little bit, and but it's really all about changing lives. This is our love letter to the world, to the country, and we're just delivering the mail. That's all.
And I just want to bring a clarity when Dr. Freeman said 1%. And let me just share some of those 1% districts that we're in right now. New York City Public Schools, Detroit Public Schools, Seattle Public Schools, Peoria Public Schools. Dallas, Texas ISD, and some of the larger school systems throughout Denver, Colorado, Denver Public Schools, and a host of others. So that 1% is almost right at 150 school systems, and we're growing every day. And I think that this is, Dr. Freeman said it, our love letter to the world. And I think that with this, we can have major change, because we can enlighten and also lighten the minds of people. Thank you.
By the way, out of character, is there someone here that has a birthday today? Or yesterday, the day tomorrow? Who has the closest birthday to today?
Mine was the
The
11th.
12th? Can I check your license?
19th.
19th?
No, no,
Which is
mine-
closer, the 12th or the 19th? I don't even know what today is.
Yeah, no, mine was the 11th.
19th? Who's the 19th?
All right.
Are you 19th? Can you give us your address? You're going to get a copy of this in the mail to you. It's a gift from us. What is this?
Those are some of our posters.
Some posters?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You got
They
one
look
for
readable,
your
they're not.
birthday. Who else's birthday's around here? Come on up. Don't be shy. Who else? Come on up. Who else? I'll tell you what, whoever comes up here first, I don't care if it's your birthday or not. You get this. Who wants it? You got one. You got one.
Dr. Freeman, can you explain the poster?
Yeah, this is from a gentleman by the name of Leonard Freeman. He's a brother from another mother, and this is a young man looking back over the water to ancient Africa, and it's just it's very deep when you start looking at it, and once you put it on frame, it should take all the. Thank you. Keep it easy. That's all, folks. Thank you.
That was awesome. That really is a great start to talk about what we're trying to do here in Peoria. And when I don't know if we'll ever be done, but as we move along and we begin to build that 80-story, we're going to remember that. So each story that we build on, we're going to think about some of the things that you and Dr. Milton have said. So thank you both for being here tonight. Another great start to what it is that we're trying to accomplish here in Peoria City and Peoria County is this 2022 Peoria City County Racial Disparity Report. Charity Gunn is the Racial Justice and Equity Coordinator for Illinois Central College. The position title sounds familiar? Well, it's no coincidence. This position was created to be instrumental in this commission in mind. Charity, as mentioned, she was instrumental in coordinating the first training for commissioners for this commission. How many of you participated in the training with Dr. Milton via Zoom? It was a great training. It was great. And then we also had facilitation training as well. Charity compiled this report, and all of you have a copy at the table. She compiled this report, and she researched many of the areas that are covered by the subcommittees of the Joint Commission on Racial Justice and Equity. She's going to talk a little bit about how this report, the purpose, as well as what were some of the findings that she was able to find in her research.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you guys. My name is Charity Gunn. Like Mary said, I'm the Racial Justice and Equity Coordinator at Illinois Central College. In this role, I had the distinct honor and privilege of preparing a countywide racial disparity report, of which each of you have a copy at your table. The purpose of this report is to analyze the systemic and historical racial inequities in Peoria County, their causes, and how those systemic inequities and their related disparities show up in Peoria in present day. This report takes a holistic and system-based approach, assessing disparities across a wide range of systems, including economics, education, healthcare, housing, criminal justice, environmental, and transportation. These systems were intentionally chosen to align with the subcommittees and the focus of areas of this commission. While the data in this report may be alarming, it is important that we have an in-depth and working knowledge of the challenges we face as a community. So organizations like this commission can effectively make a measurable impact on increasing equity and reducing the disparities. You may be aware of some of the key data points in this report, such as some of the income inequality between Black and white Peorians. The median net income for a Black family in Peoria County is less than 50% of that than a white family. Or some of the disparities in the criminal justice system. A Black person in Peoria County is 3.6 times more likely to be incarcerated than a white Peoria County resident. These disparities, though significant and alarming, may not come as a surprise to many of you. However, this report also amplifies the other disparities and the root causes of those disparities, some of which are not often mentioned in common discussions. For instance, has anybody in this room considered that the intentional placement of I-74 disrupted the economy of a Peoria Black neighborhood? Yes. Exactly. Essentially creating an island of poverty, right? Completely cutting off that entire neighborhood from the primary economic centers, which result in a systemic decline of quality of life that has persisted over many generations. Or the fact that Peorians are twice as likely to die in our healthcare system than their white counterparts. As you can see, the significant disparities exist across every system in our county, and the report will help us establish a baseline that we can measure our work moving forward. I encourage each of you to sit with this data, and I hope that the contents will be helpful in advancing this important work. I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. This work is not easy. It is not for the faint of heart, for sure. And I'm hopeful that together we can make an impact to change, Peoria moving forward. Thank you guys so much.
What we've been waiting for. We have 8 subcommittees that have been working for almost an entire year, looking at the disparities in Peoria City and Peoria County. We will go in alphabetical order, starting with child and youth development.
What we'll ask you is that each of the chairs, as they come up, identify themselves by name.
Good evening. My name is Anupama Wadarolu. I'm a co-chair for Child and Youth Development. Before I talk about our key indicators, I would like to acknowledge my subcommittee members who have been so patient with me while we organize, navigate, and schedule our Zoom calls. And this is our joint effort. I couldn't have done this without their help, and I'm so thankful to them, and I'm hoping that we would do more great things moving forward. It's not about the results, it's about the journey. We're taking it together. So with that in mind, well, as you know, we have given the subtopic Child and Youth Development. This is such a broad topic that involves so many layers. So while we navigated through our meetings, we finally decided on focus on educational aspect of child and youth development. So we decided to divide our categories, our subcommittee, the topic of education into 4 different categories. One is birth to 5 years of age, from 6 years to 10 years, 11 years to 14, then 15 to 18 years of age. So we looked at academic success of students in these 4 categories. We also examined additional factors that are involved in these students' educational attainment. With that in mind, one of our key indicators are their kindergarten readiness, from the preschool to until when they started kindergarten. Then we also examine third grade level English language and math proficiency, 8th grade level English language and math proficiency, high school truancy. Then, of all these layers, the one thing that is more important is the support these students are receiving with their education. This is only the first level, and I know we have to dig deeper into it. One of our resources is 2020 Heart of Illinois United Way Community Assessment. Most of our examination results are pre-COVID. I know there are results coming up next year, and they could change. But we do have an amazing partners. We are going to work next year in our second, level following this year. And these are all our key community partners. And our subcommittee members, we have decided, we have reached out to some of them already. And they would love to sit with us or chat with us and work with us. And I am looking forward to taking this, our work to the next level and hoping to present some more concrete evidence or concrete, data second year. And I do want to once again thank you, Mayor Ali and the steering committee for giving us this opportunity. And I do want to thank my subcommittee commissioners to work with me patiently. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Nia McFarland-Dry, and I am the co-chair of Economic Development and Jobs.
And I'm Tom Pilger, also co-chair.
Okay, I was expecting to see our subcommittee up there. Well, I'm just going to jump right into it. The work that we've done to date, we've been able to review and evaluate the King County Equity and Social Justice strategic plan. We decided that we won't be using that study, though it is inspirational. It's just very internal to their operations. But we did discover that one purpose of our subcommittee would be to change the behaviors in the community, in the region, and not just the city and county government. We've also reviewed data from ICC's Workforce Equity Initiative. I'm not going to butcher that data because our subcommittee member is not here. We've discussed past efforts to address community issues, discussed racial equity and justice issues related to jobs and economic development and potential metrics. Ultimately, we hope to find a long-term solution and focus on what the city can do to encourage a more inclusive economy. What does the city and county control? Are there any policies and practices that are impacting economic growth or stifling equity? And examine how the city is investing, what the city is investing in, as well as where those challenges and what those challenges and barriers are. So that's one of our main focuses right now.
If you move to key indicators, we selected the three that we list on the chart here. Each of those are available through the annual American Community Survey. We've got data history going back, data history going forward. Now, 2020 data had a lot of problems due to COVID collection, and particularly with lower income and marginalized communities. So that data we kind of threw out, but we'll be picking up the 2021 data starting this fall. If you go to the next slide, one of the things we looked at is because, when you get into either median household income, poverty rates or unemployment rates, those will flow up and down as economic cycles change. So we're really going to look probably more at what we call, if there was no inequities, that ratio would be 1. But actually, if you look at unemployment rate or the median income, we basically have differences of 2 to 3 times. So that gives us a top tier thing to go after. If you go to the next one, these were a number. When we did our work, we interviewed about 14 of these organizations to find out what they were doing today, what kind of successes they were having, where they were having, what barriers they faced, where they could use help from the city or county. But I think as we move forward into looking at strategies, we're going to have to be more intentional. So far, we've talked to them really together what they're doing, but we haven't really actually asked them whether they want to be an ally of this commission. So that's going to have to be more intentional. And I suspect as we get into the work, we're going to have to find ways in which we may have to create new structures and possibly some incentives to move the organizations out of their silos that they work in today. There's some terrific work being done, but it's very piecemeal. So if we're going to really have a bigger impact, we have to find a way to kind of get everyone pulling the oars in the same direction. And that may require some change, some new structures that we don't have today, and maybe some city-county incentives to help move the action in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Environment and Climate Committee. I want to first thank the committee members who are here tonight and those who have been working on this diligently. The chairs were not able to be in attendance, and so I said I'd take one for the team. Work today. They have done quite a bit of work researching, looking at poor quality air, looking at air pollution, looking at the disparities as it relates to Black and Latinos, and the composition of the goods and services by the non-Hispanic whites disproportionately causing air pollution. Two of the things that they looked at in key indicators, these are some of the key indicators, but two of the areas that were most glaring was outdoor air quality. It's killing more than 100,000 people yearly. The current state, Black and Hispanic minorities. Black get exposed by about 56% more, Latinos 63% more, and whites 17%. Safe outdoor environment. Children are susceptible to the environment and pollutions, especially in their homes, where they spend 70% of their time. One of the leading issues is asthma, then lead poisoning, radon exposure. Currently, Peoria has 13% in high-risk zip codes, 13% more in lead poisoning for our children. The environment and justice communities, there are several here in Peoria. They are classified as sacrifice zones. Those are zones in where they have industries that heavily pollute. And those communities are talked about being the frontline communities. And those are the heaviest hit. And they have our children and some of our poorest children in those communities. Some of the key partners are listed here. The EPA, the City of Peoria County and City Health Department, Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, Sierra Club are some of the few that they will be working with as we move forward.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Freeman, I just want to say it's nice to see another Canadian in the room. Ontario, and I guarantee I did not spend as much time on the ice as you did. My brothers did, but I did not. I'm a warm-blooded Canadian. My name is Nicole Robertson. I am the co-chair of the Health and Human Services Committee. My other co-chair, Dr. Francesca Armour, could not be here with us tonight, but I will do my best to represent the work of our subcommittee. So again, there's a very long list here. We have some people in the crowd. Many thanks to our subcommittee who have volunteered their time over the last year to meet on a monthly basis, taking time away from everyone's busy lives and careers and families. So thank you so much to everyone on our subcommittee. Next slide, please. Oh, wait a minute, that's me. I'm very bossy, can you tell? I just expect everybody to push the buttons for me. So our progress to date, as I said, we've been meeting monthly since July of 2021. We were able to hold one meeting in person before we had to do our rapid switch to virtual meetings, which we've all become quite zoomed out. At least I can speak in my own experience. We, of course, did learn about all of the OMA guidelines. We adhere to all the guidelines that we had, that were required to do so. We've varied in 50 to 85% attendance. I just wanted to include this. You know, I think a lot of our subcommittees have experienced, you know, this same issue of keeping our committee members, who are all very busy people, engaged. So we fluctuated. We did, about halfway through the year, kind of put together sort of a very intentional plan to personally reach out to all of our committee members, and we changed our own structure to really try to re-engage people a little bit more. So we have had our ups and downs, but we have a really solid group of people that are very committed to this work. We did start out our group by staying all together as one large subcommittee at those monthly meetings. In March of 2022, though, we did decide to go with a different model. We broke out into smaller work groups, which I think was right at the point where we really did see some kind of re-engagement. You know, having work tasks assigned in a group of 3 or 4 is a little bit of a different dynamic. So we coincided our re-engagement efforts with breaking out into a little bit smaller work groups, and then we meet every other month as a larger subcommittee. So we found that to be quite successful. So what we did was we started at the beginning in a larger group and just really talked about and used the expertise of everyone on our subcommittee to really just brainstorm what are the top disparities that we see as it relates to health equity. And we really just brainstormed. We spent a couple of sessions. It was an open session. We wanted to hear everyone's voice and what their thoughts were on what that list should look like. We did identify 29 topics or themes, and then we sent it home. The homework for the next month was to really prioritize those. So we really thought, we can't cover everything. You know, we have to kind of tackle what you can tackle. So how would we prioritize these top themes and disparities? And we'd asked our subcommittee members to rank them based on their professional expertise, their life experience, you know, so that's where we moved into the next phase of our work. And the top priorities that we identified, and this again is not to say that the other ones that were not identified as a top priority are any less important. We just had to kind of focus our efforts on something that is manageable. So the top 5 disparities were preventive care, access to care, which includes follow-up care, education, both patient and provider education, and health literacy. Those were mentioned and prioritized the most by our subcommittee members. And the bottom, trust and implicit bias in the healthcare system was also obviously identified as as one of the top priorities. But in our discussion, we said that's really foundational to everything that we do. So we kept it on here. It does not have its own separate work group, but with that understanding that trust and implicit bias in our healthcare systems, it absolutely has to be that foundational piece. No, we're not supposed to lick our fingers anymore with I just did. So this is where, and I'm just going to blow through this real quickly because we have a better slide that gives a little bit better detail. Our key community partners we were in a unique situation with our Health and Human Services Committee. So as we started to dig in and talk about collecting data, we knew that in the fall of 2021, there was the Community Health Needs Assessment that was being conducted by the Partnership for a Healthy Community that many of you are familiar with. So we have a phenomenal group of people that are working on conducting our Community Health Needs Assessment and collecting data. So we really started to think, how do we use and leverage our subcommittee to complement instead of compete with the work that we already know is happening and is being done very, very well. So that's where we really started to go kind of in a direction of how do we really collaborate? How do we capitalize? How do we leverage the work that's being done by the partnership? And Monica Hendrickson is here in the Peoria City County Health Department, so thank you for all of your efforts. And just having that amount of data and resources available to us really put us in, we kind of had the luxury of saying, let's build on this. And then the Healthcare Collaborative is a group, a collaboration, a coalition that's formed and is currently being led by the University of Illinois College of Medicine here in Peoria. So Dr. Ayer leads a group of individuals. So that is similar goals. So between the three entities, we really thought, how do we really capitalize on this? And this is me throwing in a little splash of color here with the orange instead of our blue slide. So you can really see, this is the model that we looked at, this triad of the Partnership for a Healthy Community or the Peoria City County Health Department, the Healthcare Collaborative, and then our Health and Human Services Subcommittee. So we really started to dig in deeper about how can those three coalitions complement each other's work and really collaborate with each other to most effectively use the resources and the data that exist here in Peoria. So that's kind of where we started. And then what we came up with is the model that you see on the right, where what we propose is really an opportunity to use our Health and Human Services Subcommittee and the expertise that we have on this committee to really just provide an additional layer of review. So we will work collaboratively with the Peoria City County Health Department to look at interventions with a racial equity lens. Again, in those four disparity topics that we've talked about. So if there's an intervention, we have another group of people that can say, have we looked at it from this particular lens? Have we looked at it from this angle? Are we causing any unintended consequences with some implementations that might further widen disparities instead of reducing them? So we really thought this could be a way that we can really capitalize on all of the work that is being done and use, again, all of our resources most effectively. So we really look forward to continued partnership with the Peoria City County Health Department, with the Healthcare Collaborative, and really figuring out the best way that we can move forward and really leveraging the expertise that we have as we move forward and move into the next phase of this project. So thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Marcus Peoples, and I have Pastor Deborah Avey here as my co-chair. We actually had a lot of the exact same headwinds that the Health and Human Services team had, where we started out with a large group, fairly dedicated. We were pretty consistent, and then COVID hit, Zoom meetings, family, all of the other issues that you would naturally experience. So our team kind of dwindled down a little bit, and then we did a similar tactics where we broke out our teams in smaller subcommittees and focused on some of our areas that we found as concerns. We also took the training that allowed us to communicate with our team a little bit better, and we try to extract our ideas more efficiently from our team, as opposed to kind of making sure that we weren't giving ideas or giving concepts or leading any of our team members. Again, thank you to all of our team members that are on there. Team members that we had that remained on the team are very, very dedicated. They're the ones that are putting in the work that are communicating within the team. So I'd like to thank them, and also Pastor Deb Avery, who hit the ground running. It was a fairly quick transition, and she picked up the ball and it's helped me tremendously in terms of communication, a lot of the scheduling, and the organization of the whole team as a whole. So what did we do in our first year? Our primary goals, we looked to build our team, develop a shared understanding of housing conditions and needs that exist. And based on that, we looked to deepen our knowledge on the Peoria demographics and the intersections of housing and inequities. We wanted to make sure that we didn't make any assumptions along the way, meaning kind of leading the witness saying this is what our issue is. We wanted to make sure we brought this back and begin to make connections between the data and the actual demographics and conditions on the ground.
So getting organized has been a challenge, as many of us have experienced, and our committee is almost half the size it was when we started. So, but we feel like we're lean and mean, like we're ready. We've had to do things and start up to like get people on board with Zoom. That's been a challenge. Everybody doesn't have access to the same technology. If we want to talk about equity and disparities, so we can start there. We started to outline some steps that we're working towards now to accomplishing our assignment, which we think is still kind of evolving, trying to figure out what that means. And then we're always trying to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. Because what happens in Zoom is that, you know, if you don't know how to hit the button or you don't hit the button, you might have something worth saying but never have the access. So we're really focusing on equity just within our procedures.
Absolutely, absolutely. So team building and information gathering. Our initial conversations, they include sharing thoughts and questions. We brought as commissioners who already have our basic expertise and experiences through the city and the entire history. We just want to identify who on our subcommittee had what skills, who had what connections, who were involved in different community or outlets within the city. So we found out that we had a pretty diverse team, and we had a lot of different connections throughout the city in terms of Peoria Housing Authority and a few other, Pastor Deborah Avery, and a lot of our community involvement. So yeah, we definitely have a good base on there. Beginning to track common themes similar to the other team. When it came to quality housing, there were so many issues, right? So they mentioned they had 29 they put on the board. We
Easily have that.
very easily. We had to kind of try to focus and get to a space to where we could actually kind of bite on this elephant as opposed to just trying to, we didn't want to swallow from the fire hose. So we broke it down to maybe 6 to 8 indicators, and we wanted to try to make sure that we focus on that, and we took our subcommittee teams in groups of 3 and moved forward that way.
So we started with the understanding that housing is a fundamental human right, and that without quality housing, none of us in this room will be able to actually do our work, because people have to have a place to live that is stable and is of good quality. And so we know that we need to explore some things, and this is what we're looking at in year 2. We need to know more about what policies currently exist. It's very opaque. So penetrating that is really difficult, has been difficult, and we're going to keep pushing. We need to better understand the connections and relationship between Peoria City County and Peoria Housing Authority. Also quite opaque. We're going to be working on that. We also know, as important as data is, that people of color in Peoria, especially Black Peorians, have been sharing stories for a long time, observations, experiences that describe very real trauma that people are carrying in their bodies from racist harm that's been done around housing for generations. And because quantitative data can only get us so far, we have to figure out as a committee how we can factor in qualitative data to make an impact. Because the qualitative data, these stories, these individual people talking about what they actually lived or what their grandparents actually lived, this is the story of Peoria that we've got to disrupt.
So where we go from here, we need to have a better understanding of the generational impact of this long history of racism as it comes to, as it pertains to quality housing here in Peoria. We want to identify policies and procedures that create barriers in home ownership or lack thereof. We want to make sure that we understand that we're not looking for a specific policy that says that you can't do. Maybe it's the one that says, based on the practices that are happening in Peoria, maybe there is a policy that needs to be recommended, and that's our task here. So we want to make sure that we're kind of making sure that we're not leading the witness here. So we want to make sure that we are looking for assessments of where low-income households are currently situated and identify barriers of mobility across neighborhoods. So you mentioned that Highway 74. Is that an issue? How can we get people from one space to another? And we just need to make sure we understand the connection between the lack of affordable housing and homelessness.
So all of that factors into our key indicators, which are there. We're going to gather the data that we need to, and we're looking at these 5 sort of areas: home ownership, renting versus home ownership. This report that's on our table is going to be very helpful. Low income residents, quality of housing in Peoria in general, especially in the 05 zip code area, but also East Bluff is problematic in terms of housing quality. Unhoused population, we don't talk about that a lot, but it is growing in Peoria, and it is going to be getting more as inflation and housing costs go up and fewer people can afford homes. So then we've got to analyze all that. So this is all our big job for year 2.
So last thing, we just want to research these key indicators and then identify gaps in the data, and then have the resources that can provide that information. And that's the big gist of everything. We have reached out to, or we are working on firming up some of our potential process partners and developing our relationships with those over the next couple of years. So, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Daniel McLeod, the co-chair of the subcommittee on IT, and this is my co-chair, Lisa Marie Schultz.
And we're both new.
She didn't tell me she was going to say that. On behalf of our hard-working subcommittee, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity to serve. Congressman and civil rights activist John Lewis referred to internet access as the civil rights issue of the 21st century. During the height of the pandemic, there were a lot of disparities that came to light, whether they be health disparities, whether they be economic disparities. Our focus tonight is on the IT disparities. Many of you may recall seeing a news story which showed some little kids sitting in their mom's car in a parking lot using Taco Bell's Wi-Fi to do their schoolwork, or you experienced the frustration of trying to work remotely while your partner or your children in the next room also tried to get online. One of the charges of this subcommittee is to examine and identify racial inequalities as they relate to the internet and technology access in the city and county of Peoria, so that those children, or anyone for that matter, will be able to access those QR codes that Dr. Milton spoke about so eloquently. Access to technology in households in the city of Peoria is a key indicator of the racial disparities impacting our community. The IT subcommittee plans to investigate solutions for getting access into homes. We would also like to explore Wi-Fi and access points in public spaces, such as libraries, government buildings, nonprofit community organizations, and schools, which may be avenues for expanding Wi-Fi and offering internet hotspots across points to area residents.
Our initial research found that majority Black neighborhoods within the city of Peoria bear the brunt of these imbalances that we mentioned, including the absence of high-speed, reliable internet, a lack of coverage, inadequate equipment. People might have a cell phone or a tablet, but they don't have a laptop or a desktop, and insufficient levels of digital proficiency and literacy. When we drilled down into some of the data, census data regarding these key indicators of access, adoption, meaning voluntary use of technology, and affordability, we found that the percentage of households in both the city of Peoria and Peoria County with broadband internet subscriptions is close to 81%, which doesn't seem great for a civil right, but it does get worse. When you look at households in, for example, Census Tract number 9, which is located downtown along the river and then back towards Dozer Park, you see those rates plummet from 81% to 54%. And for computer ownership in that tract, the disparity is even more stark. only 34% of households own a desktop or laptop, compared to rates of 70%, both city and county-wide.
To address these issues, we need to understand the levels of internet availability, speed, and usage in order to pinpoint areas with the highest need. Affordability appears to be the most common barrier to high-speed internet access and usage, but other reasons for lack of adoption must be identified. Luckily, there are others who are examining these issues, such as the Peoria and Woodford County Accelerate Illinois Broadband Infrastructure Planning Program team, which just launched a survey looking to these very issues. And we look forward to the results and any opportunities to partner with them. We plan to, at some point, generate a community survey to determine the need for desktops and laptops within targeted neighborhoods. We hope to partner with organizations already working in the community, such as PCs for People, to provide free and low-cost computers.
The final area that we'll look at is digital proficiency. And folks may be savvy on social media and easily navigate their iPhones, but those skills don't necessarily translate into an ability to troubleshoot a connection issue, to demonstrate a mastery of Microsoft 365 for that new and better job, or to even spot spam in our inbox. So addressing these gaps is crucial. And we know that minority populations are more likely to lack access to technology and therefore to digital literacy, and that impacts health, education, public safety, and economic opportunities. An initial focus on adult populations and programs that teach technology use, structure, and problem solving to build digital literacy may be the best first step toward building more widespread proficiency in underserved populations.
To further bridge the digital divide, we'll need to employ alternate avenues for disseminating information to community members who lack connectivity through direct mail flyers, event boards, church bulletins, or geolocated targeted texts. We must rely on and partner with local sources such as churches, community centers, libraries, nonprofits to build trust within our community.
We might need some money to make this happen. I don't know. The Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD, funded through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, is providing about $1 billion to the state of Illinois to get broadband to unserved and underserved communities. And the Connect Illinois Broadband Investment Package has nearly $400 million in matching grants dedicated to achieving sustainable broadband equity throughout the state. And we would like to participate and support and collaborate with the grant writing that is going to be happening with some of those dollars.
Our subcommittee is finally beginning to feel like we've gotten our hands on a roadmap so that we can begin to address some of these issues. We're looking to partner with some of the organizations that you can see on the slide. We'll continue to put in the work, plan our work and work our plan as we continue to go forward within the next year. We look forward to the progress that we'll make so that we can level the playing field as it relates to information and technology in Peoria and the surrounding area. Thank you.
I actually thought the lights were going to be a little dimmer. Right. Just want to say good evening to everyone. To thank all of those that are part of our committee. Some of those are here tonight, some of those that are not. Appreciate your work that's been said by others, your sacrifice, but then also your commitment to ensuring that we are successful in the things that we do. Although we understand that our job partly is to build recommendations. Everything that we're doing is very important in some shape, form, or fashion. So we thought tonight that we would take and kind of call it the a slight trip or take a little journey from where we started to where we are now. So our initial meetings started last fall, and during the November timeframe, we ended up having a co-chair change. By the way, did I say we are the Justice Committee? So we are the Justice Committee, and I'm Derek Parker, and
Aguilera.
this is Loretta Aguilera, and certainly godsend and a wealth of resources. We appreciate her being on the team. So we initially established some meetings, our meeting protocols, the cadence, the dates, the time that we would meet. We went over the charter review. We studied the King County report, which we thought was important, what worked for them, what didn't. Try to learn some lessons there and take those and call them our own and apply them. And at some point we got to discussing the topic of justice issues, which at that point we understood that justice is a large topic and very broad. So we tried to break that down a little bit and talk about some of the things that were important to the individuals that were on the committee. We did come up with, like others, a large list of things that everyone felt that was something that we could talk about. We further drilled that down a little bit because we knew we couldn't do everything. One thing that we did understand is that the topics that we did actually pick, we wanted to give ourselves some room. So for example, if we chose one topic and went down that path, we wanted to ensure that everything that we did was data driven because the data would tell it. Sometimes even with justice, we all have those things that are personal to us, right? And but it could just be a hot button issue. In other words, it's something that happened today, so it's a big topic, but then tomorrow it's something different. The data may tell you it's not a consistent thing that happens throughout justice. So we wanted to get to those things and say, what does the data tell us? What is important? What is not? What do we see consistently? What do we see causing a disparity and drive with that? And so that's what we did. We kind of broke that down a little bit. And at that point, we began to start to request some of the data that we were needing.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you, Dr. Ali, Mayor Ali, for allowing us to be a part of this work. And to our subcommittee team members, we really appreciate all of the time and effort that you've put into this. Like many of others, we've had some challenges along the way with our attendance and our membership, but those that are remaining have been very consistent, and you can tell that they're engaged and very passionate about the work, so we really appreciate that. With the justice system, unlike maybe some of the other subcommittees, we did not have community assessments, and so trying to gather the data has been a bit of a challenge. There are disparate sources of the data, and we've just only scratched the surface really on understanding it, obtaining it, understanding it, and really trying to pull out insights as it relates to the justice system. So we look forward to that in our next phase of our subcommittee. Our sub-teams were broken out into juvenile justice, bail and incarceration, and causes of violence. And so, like the other subcommittees, some of them have mentioned, we decided to brainstorm on the top 13, I think it was, issues, and then drill down and really have a voting and a scoring on the top 3. And then our sub-teams broke out. We continue to meet monthly on a recurring basis for 1 to 2 hours. And then our sub-teams would then meet. They've interviewed some key stakeholders within the community, attorneys, government community members, and we're really trying to pair our qualitative data, what we're hearing anecdotally, stories, with our hard data once we were able to accumulate that as well. Another challenge, of course, which is not any secret, is the pandemic, right? It's been kind of a hard thing for all of us, but we've continued to move forward despite that. So really we wanted to create a strategy. I think very early on we understood that we wanted a little bit more rigor and structure with what we're doing, so we did create status reports And our team members have used these as a way to communicate what work has yet to be initiated, what's in flight, and then what is not able to move forward because of barriers, challenges, and whatnot. So we really look forward to this next phase to be able to really accumulate more data and to understand it and to really move past kind of this last year. I can appreciate Dr. Freeman's analogy to the 80-story skyscraper. We've spent a lot of time over the last year understanding our current state, because we know that if we don't understand our current state, then how can we see a clear vision moving forward? So while it's taken a year, we do think that we've laid the groundwork for even better work to come. So thank you.
Good evening, everybody. The Transportation and Mobility Committee, Co-Chair Ron Raspberry. This is my other co-chair, Erskine Towns.
Hello, everyone.
But I want to say we started off with another co-chair, Peter Kovac, and we had he wanted to leave because he had medical issues. So I talked to him today. I told him to give him a shout out, but Peter was a very, very big help in the beginning until he left. So I just kind of just followed his lead. So he set me up pretty good. Oh. Okay, I just want to recognize our members. We started off with 13 members. So we got members, Lorraine King, Captain Mullis, Brenda Meta, she's not here. Oh, there she is back there. Okay, I see you. All right, Antoine Banks, and Tina Foley, and Ashman Reddy.
So thank you, everyone. My name is Ursula Town. As Ron mentioned, I had to fill the shoes of Peter Kovac, and he really did get our ball rolling as far as trying to get the structure together. He was really great at engaging all of the different members of the committee, which I really appreciated, and try to follow that lead. So in terms of working to date, so obviously, we sat down, we had a lot of really great discussions early on. We definitely recognize that transportation is a key to education, employment, and services that allow residents to fulfill their potential, just as citizens of our community. A lot of this information, though, too, came from the Kane County study, so that was something that they recognized as well. Also, understanding our region's prosperity, as we all know, there's lots of big industry here. It's dependent upon the ability of workers and freight to move throughout the region, to get to jobs, to move material into our area. And so these are definitely the things that we use as a foundation when we started our surveys. And so our committee conducted a survey. It was really great that it was backed up by other surveys that were done by other people that agreed with the same top 3 things. We had a lot of different indicators to start with, but in terms of the top 3, we have our indicators here. And Rob's going to come first.
Proximity to public transportation, which deals with how long it takes a person to get to the bus stop, or is it lit in a well-lit area? Is it a dangerous spot, or should it be over in this type of neighborhood, or should the stop be in the middle of the block, or should it be at the corner? But that's more proximity to the transportation.
So the safety aspect, obviously a very important one. It was definitely in the top 3. And so we talked a lot about this in terms of what aspects of safety were really important for us to consider. We talked about safety of bus stops, didn't really see any issues there with CityLink in terms of bus stop services for safety. They've made some improvements to bus stops, I think, that are really relevant. The best that we can figure is that there's really a lack of awareness in some areas. We do have some huge systemic differences in Peoria versus other larger cities, just in terms of traffic calming and trouble areas, designated bike lanes, especially in high bike areas, right? We've had some accidents. I think our gut probably tells us, we read the news, right? We hear what's that there's been pedestrian fatalities, right? That was one of the things our gut told us to go after and look at some data there. And actually, when you compare our part of the central Illinois to the rest of Illinois, we actually have almost twice as many pedestrian fatalities as other areas in the state, which I thought was kind of surprising, actually. 2 of them happened in the exact same area, in the western area, which is obviously one of these areas that's a minority area, right? And I don't know that there's really been anything to address that, so I think that's definitely something that we're gonna go after. Sorry about that. Also, affordability. So this is a really huge thing. So we look at these areas, right? We've got such a high percentage of minority people that are under the poverty level. It costs about $25,000 to own a car over the course of 5 years. When you consider that, like, that's your income, right? Like, that's a big chunk of your income. It was really great that Charity Gunn, she put together that map. If you guys take a look at that, actually, we've got some really good statistics. They show about who, so that said 10% of people don't have cars. Well, actually, it's a much bigger percentage than that, because if you look at the area of the people who don't have cars, it's really concentrated in that place that's south of the 74. So if you look at that map, you'll be able to see that. And actually, it's a huge number. 500 plus households per square mile have no vehicles. So think of the dependence on public transportation, what pressure that puts on not only CityLink, right, but to be able to find new solutions. I feel like that's really where the microtransit study that they conducted is really going to fall into play. They got a lot of good data there. They understand that the Black American is 4.4 times more likely to use public transportation. So of course we need to improve that, right? We need to have better options for people, and maybe that microtransit is part of the solution. Okay. Thank you.
All right, partners. CityLink was one of the greatest and the biggest helps. Actually, was my former employer. I was there for 18 years as a mechanic. Just retired April 18th, 2022. I don't know if Amy Watson is here. I didn't see her, but she was the biggest, greatest help. All I had to do was shoot her email or go see her, and she would give me all the information I needed as far as data, whatever I needed.
So Ron and I were also recently involved in the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission's public forum, which is really an eye-opener for us in terms of the involvement with them. But that's going to be a really great group that's going to partner with us. They're going to help us make, you guys have heard about the infrastructure bill that's coming around, right? There's a lot of money there. It's something that we really want to get that money to come to Peoria in terms of being able to create better opportunity to jobs. We're going to work with the Peoria Economic Development Council, the Peoria Area Chamber of Commerce, as well as Illinois Central College. There's this other organization that I don't know a ton about, but it definitely looks like they've got a lot of good people involved around the state. It's the Illinois Pupil Transportation Advisory Committee. It has to do with how they get kids to school, right? We want to make sure kids have good access to education. We also want to understand how transportation is affecting our older minority people in the community, so that's something we're going to go after as well. So something cool though too about being on this committee is I've had other people in the community, like from Peoria County engineers, reach out to me and say, hey, you want to get involved with us on this? You want to help advise us on this? And I think this is really great. When you start thinking about the decisions that were put in place to put the 74 where it went, and understanding what a huge investment that was and how permanent that investment was and how that affected lives of lots of people, we need to be able to, like, we're here. We're on the journey to be able to make these decisions, to make the next 20 years, and beyond, right? Something really beautiful, right? We could do it together. Thank you.
And the last committee, but not least. First of all, I just want to take a moment and to thank all of the subcommittees for their work and for their presentations. I was sitting here, and Tim and I, when we started this, we said you had 5 to 7 minutes. And we had certain different committees who said, I can't talk for 5 to 7 minutes. and so Tim said to him, well, tell me what it is you've been doing. And he used the timer to time it. And they went about 10 minutes. And he said, see, you just told me what you've been doing, and it took you 10 minutes to do. So thank you all. Steering committee. The steering committee. Sorry. You got me? Okay. All right. Our steering committee. We've been fortunate to have talented and motivated steering committee. This is our steering committee. in large part, we've already talked a little bit about what the committees have done. In large part, our role was to guide the process, to make sure that we were on track to provide support, review proposals arising from the subcommittees and steering committees, the submission to the city and county to make appointments, new chairs as other chairs had to leave for various reasons, and we had to work to find other chairs to take over, and they've done an outstanding job. Some did it on a dime. Creation and maintain organizational, social media, and support structure for the commission, and represent the city and the county in racial justice and equity matters outside of the government and bodies. Some of our activities that we've conducted this year, we've done quite a bit. When I look at the list, Tim put the list together, when I look at it, but some of the key things is making sure that we put structure in place. As we said earlier on, we were given directions to look at King County and to bring this commission together and move forward in doing the work that needs to be done here in the Peoria City and Peoria County. And so with that, we have put a variety of processes in place. Attendance, various things. And so we did that with the help of our steering committee. Tim, you want to talk about what's the next step?
Thank you very much. Yeah, so what are the next steps for our commission? Now, so a number of our committees talked about what they'd be doing over the next year, but let me add to it a bit. Number one, completion of the key indicator stage of our work plan. Remember I said that was stage one. This will create our baseline, and it will inform our website, and it will provide reliable data on racial disparity in the areas where our subcommittees are working. Second, broader public outreach with the end of COVID restrictions. So a lot of people have talked about the COVID issues tonight, and it did prevent us from meeting with a lot of community groups. We need to do that. So community meetings to seek input from our community and to assure that together with them and all the members of our steering committee and our subcommittees, that we create a shared vision of racial justice and equity for our community. Next, involvement of community allies. We need to work together. We want to ensure that others in the community know that we are here not to compete with them, but to collaborate with them and to ally with them, to join hands in fighting racial injustice in our community. Point three, completion of the initial strategic plan for the Racial Justice and Equity Commission. A number of our committees tonight talked about what their thoughts were originally of where they wanted to head to with their plans. Some are already starting to get there. Phase 2 of our project is completion of these initial strategic plans. Our goal is to complete this by the end of the year. Now, I want to make clear that this doesn't mean that that is the end of strategic planning. It doesn't prevent additional strategic planning over time, but it's our first effort to create a strategic plan. Fourth, launch of a public dashboard and a public website for the Joint Commission. The dashboard is going to be akin to what exists in other communities, and it will show where we stand on racial justice and equity indicators at the beginning of our work and what progress we're making towards improving that. Some of you may be familiar with the websites of cities like St. Louis, who have in a very graphic way presented to their communities what they're doing, what they want to achieve, and have a report card for achieving that. It puts pressure on them to do it, but it also shows what success, or frankly lack of success, they might be having. Our website is going to do two things. Number one, it's going to house all the work of our commission. But more important, I think, is this. Well, just as important, let me say that this way. How much work has been done in our community in the past on racial justice issues? And we look at each other and say, where is that? I remember us talking about that, and I remember us having some memos about this, but where is that? This will be the place where we will house all information from now and in the future with our plans and the work that we've done in racial justice.
Something we're very excited this year. Again, we've done a lot of work. We've had a lot of meetings. We've read a lot of information. We sought out various communities that are doing this work, have done this work, and it has taken them anywhere from 5 to 7 years to even begin to get to where we are today. So we really are ahead. We may not, some people don't feel that we have made a difference, that we've made any headway, but we have. With that being said, tonight we want to talk about an announcement, a recommendation. As we said, one of the things is the steering committee is to make recommendations to the city and the Peoria County. We want to announce tonight the first recommendation that the Joint Commission on Racial Justice and Equity is presenting to the city of Peoria and to Peoria County. It's called for the city and the county to formally adopt the Racial Equity Impact Assessment. What is the Racial Equity Impact Assessment? It's a systematic examination of how different racial and ethnic groups will likely be affected by proposed action or decisions. The REIA ordinance is a legislative act by city or county which commits the governmental body to examine how a proposed action that body and how it will impact racial and ethnic minorities. Tim, you want to talk about the other areas?
Friends, I want to tell you, you may think racial equity impact assessment, etc. This is a big deal, and here's why. Very few communities in this country, very few, commit themselves to looking at the actual impact of their actions upon racial equity in their communities. Now, there's a few large communities who do it. Seattle, for example, we're not surprised about that. And there are some smaller communities that do it. Dubuque, Iowa, right? But what we're calling upon the city and the county, mayor and chairman, to do would be to adopt a racial equity impact assessment ordinance. And what it would do is commit the city and the county to examining racial impact as a part of their actions prior to the passage or termination of any policies, programs, services, plans, or budget. Now, question may be, and we've got some questions up here, do other cities or counties have it? No other cities and counties have it in Illinois, to our knowledge. I mentioned some of the larger cities in the country that do this. Illinois, as a state, explored doing this a couple of years ago. For some reason, the legislation failed. I'll let you guess why that happened. But this gives us an opportunity to be the first city and county in the state of Illinois, and perhaps nationally, for all we know, I mean, the best we've done, to adopt such an ordinance and commit ourselves to do this. It will mark us nationally, friends. Next question. Does the city or county have experience with such an ordinance? Now, I have to tell you, amazingly so, the answer is yes. I don't say amazingly so in the sense that I'm amazed that this has occurred, but I'm amazed at the quality of our thinking in our city. Patrick Ulrich, the city manager, tells me that he implemented such a policy in regard to a budget ordinance pre-COVID. And what's amazing to me is that we have already a foothold into this arena. So we have an opportunity to do it. We have some experience with it. Next question. To what local governments would it apply? Well, just the city and the county. But we will call upon each of you to ask you to help us move it to other villages, cities in Peoria County. Bardenville, Chillicothe, I could go on. But you know the county, you know the governments I'm talking about, the Park District, which is, of course, close to my heart. So it would not apply to them now, but with the city and county would apply to them, and then we would take it to others. So what are the next steps? Well, the next steps are that we plan to submit these ordinances to the city and county in the next month and ask that they implement them and start working under them 75 days from now, which is September 1. We would then like similar ordinances to be taken by this group, as I said, to other units of government in the city. And we're hopeful that the city and county will quickly pass these ordinances. We will need and we will ask for your support to get that job done. To our knowledge, as I said, we will be the first community in Illinois to have both city and county ordinances requiring REIAs. And it would be a remarkable statement to our commitment formed a year ago to change the way we look at racial justice and equity in our community, wouldn't it? What an amazing statement for our community. What an amazing statement for this commission to have that be the end. Thank you very much.
As we bring this evening to a close, tonight we have provided you with a glimpse of the process and the progress of the Joint Commission on Racial Justice and Equity for the City of Peoria and Peoria County. We believe that there is no more important mission before our city and our county. As we continue moving forward with the initiative, we will continue to keep you updated. We will also want to get you involved.
QR code.
This is a QR code for those of you who are in the audience who are not a part of the commission serving on a subcommittee or the steering committee. Here's an opportunity for you to complete an application and join us. Joining us in a common effort, vision, which sees these issues not just as social imperatives, but also economic issues which can strengthen our community for all people, regardless of color or ethnicity, which nationally distinguish our city and our county as a leader in racial justice and equity. We thank all of the commissioners and we thank all of you for being here with us tonight. Thank you.